Fantastic. So welcome everybody to our webinar today. Complimentary webinar so I can talk to you about something that I heard about very recently. It's been around for a little while, but it's not come across my path until I had a connection with someone who went to a conference the other week, and so I wanted to bring it to everybody. So this is the webinar is free, of course. If you want to purchase the resources that I really enjoyed making so much, it was just like so much fun for me to do, and I do not enough of it anymore because I'm so busy. We will show you through that. But let's talk about this tool, and let's talk about why I developed it. Just letting Sandra in. Let's talk about why I developed it. So obviously, over the time now of auditing in the NDIS scheme itself, that it's since 2018 when the new standards came out, or just before, which was 1st of July 2019, the new standards came out. The previous standards are not even worth mentioning. There was 4 of them, and it was ridiculous show. It was just laughable. So, obviously, if you've heard me before, you've heard me say I've seen a lot of things that have been quite shocking for somebody who's been around in health and human services since I graduated in 1987. So it's been quite a journey for a lot of us that have been around in this area for a long time, to have seen where things had gotten to. And one of those big things when we're auditing or consulting or dealing with regulator responses on behalf of providers is, just the lack of, first of all, that lack of assessment, the lack of a robust assessment, the lack of a robust risk assessment, and then let's follow through to the lack of the review of that assessment, the lack of the review of that risk assessment, and then let's top it all off with the lack of understanding about what, you can't give someone knowledge that they didn't sort of study to earn or work for a very long time to earn. It's really hard. You can't just pass it from person to person in an instant. It takes time to learn. And that's what we're focusing on is, upskilling everybody who needed that upskilling, and had really good intentions, coming in as NDIS providers or workers. So, that's the worst thing that I see. That's the most frightening thing. That is the thing that myself, my peers and my colleagues sit around talking about ad nauseum, at length, and what can we do? And we're all working towards doing things to improve that. Now, of course, it is also come to light, in 2021 in December with a few new standards and a few tweaks to the standards. This capability of this workforce currently to pick up on changes in people's conditions has been very poor. So we want to improve that. So that happened at a national level with the standards. But I really felt that this tool, when I saw it, was so simple that it's not going to intimidate anybody. It's such a simple thing. And the one thing I like about this tool is it was built for, and it was built in the UK, and it's been amended by a range of people, but I've amended it to suit our purposes, which I'll go through with you in a moment. It's for everyone. It's not just for carers. It's not just for unpaid carers. It's not just for paid support workers. It's not. It includes registered nurses. And I will be very clear when I say, when I audit provider services that are owned and operated by registered nurses, I am in no way any more impressed with that than I am with any other service. I don't care that they've got knowledge. They're not using it. They're not using their knowledge. They're not using their clinical processes. They're not recording things properly. They're recording them in possibly the most laziest way that I've ever seen. So not like you would expect for a service that somebody is paying money for. And let's not forget, that person is paying money, even though it's coming from the taxpayers, it's still money. They're paying for a service. They deserve to have things written down. They deserve to be monitored for changes. Now, why is this also important? For those of you who haven't heard me bark on about this, the report that came out in November 2021 also spoke of the premature deaths, the avoidable deaths in service, mostly in supported independent living, but it still happens in people's own homes as well, where they have personal care. The amount of preventable deaths occurring in this NDIS scheme is too high, and the variance in quality of care is not consistent. We need consistency in quality. It means we need to understand what quality is, and we need to have tools to support us to keep that quality happening. Yeah, so that's where it comes from. This is where it comes from. Let's have better services. In having better services, we have to equip people to be able to report things, notice things, make it easier. We can't have 10 pieces of paper for this. That's never going to happen. That's just human nature. If I give you today a form that's going to take 10 pieces of paper for you to complete, I would be very understanding of the fact that it would just never happen. So let's have a look. So first of all, now let's have a look at who's in the room. I'll put my hand, I'll get you to put your hand up so I know who's who, and Ali, have a look for me. Have I got any support workers in the room at all today? Couple? So there's a couple of support workers in the room. Okay, so mostly I'm going to have managers and owners and compliance people, et cetera, which is great because this is really targeted for you. It is perfectly acceptable for support workers as well. But what we've got to do is target the business owners, the managers, the compliance officers, the quality officers, et cetera, to be able to roll this through. And if there's support workers in here as well, fantastic. So what we've got to do is make it easy. So now I've got a bit of an idea of who's here, which is who I expected, the group that I expected to have here. All right, so I'm going to share screen now. And we're just going to talk through some documentation. So coming down to my beautiful little, so there's a package that I've put together. That package includes a policy. I've written a very brief, which is the best type of policy in my view, a very brief policy which you can slip into your core module, or you can slip into your verification module if you happen to be doing, for example, some people on low risk services are doing things like innovative community participation, etc., or nursing. You can slip it into your high intensity personal activities as well. You can slip it into anything. It doesn't have to just be in the core module. It's just a policy for you to include in whichever module you feel appropriate, which I would think is going to be core module in the division 3 area, which is about support, and obviously a module 1 as well, because I think it will complement a module 1, which is high intensity personal activity. I think it's going to complement a module 1 more or just as much as it's going to complement a core module, to be honest, because I think it's very difficult for support workers to be left with that responsibility of monitoring people, their signs, their wellness, with so little experience and so little qualifications. If I'm not seeing it done particularly well by the majority of nurses, and I'm not saying all, but if I'm not seeing it done well by the majority of registered nurses, how could we possibly expect brilliance and 100% quality and compliance from support workers? It's not fair. So let's have a look at this. So what we're saying is, most importantly, I think there's a couple of concepts that I would want you to grasp and get your staff to grasp. And I think having something collapsed down to a concept a few little principles is really important, instead of it being a whole lot of abstract information thrown at someone, them trying to prioritize and put a hierarchy around that themselves. I've tried to put a hierarchy around it. With all the training I do and write in my learning management system, and I love writing training, it's so world-changing and empowering. What I try to do with every piece of training that I write is try to collapse it down to its basic denominator, so that people can take away something. If you can take away something, you will have a better chance of remembering what it was you learnt in that training. So when do we use the stop and watch tool? I'm going to just put it out there to everyone before I go to the next thing. When do we use? What is the trigger for your support worker or nurse or volunteer or manager or care coordinator, whoever is doing the job, whoever is around that person? What will be the trigger to use the stop and watch tool? I don't mind if you voice this or you put it in the chat. Anything in the chat, Al?
No, nothing in the chat right now. Oh,
Yeah,
there we go.
What do we got?
Any change in behavior or change in circumstance in participant?
Good, very, very good contributions. So this is built for a particular trigger, and the trigger is based on having no medical or health qualifications at all. Okay, it works for anyone, whether it's family carer, or whether it's a support worker, or whether it's a registered nurse. And I don't accept that's just not high enough level for a registered nurse. As I said, they're not even writing it down now when I go and do their audits. So, I refuse to hear that it's too low level for them, because they haven't got it right yet. So it's about time that they started going back to basics and thinking about what they're being paid for. Everyone has to do that. So the trigger to pick up a stop and watch tool is there anything else? Have we read everything, Ali?
Yes.
Okay, the trigger when we pick up or use this stop and watch tool is, it's coming. The stop and watch tool is used when a person is not their usual self. That's all you need to know. And whether you're a nurse, or whether you're a manager or owner, or whether you're a support worker, no matter what, all you're looking for is they're not their usual self. The reason this tool was built, because what they found was the people on the floor, who were often the support workers, the personal care workers, etc., were the biggest determinant in whether something, in telling somebody any clinical information. They may not say it in a clinical way, but just their observations. They're the people seeing people in your SIL homes and in their homes being cared for with personal care services. They have the most amount of information, which is no different to when I say to people, it's the same on the same framework or paradigm, if you like, is when I say to people, if you want to gather risk information, you empower every single person that works for you to know what a risk is. What's a risk? Okay, you teach them what a risk is, then you have everyone in your organization reporting to their team leader, to their manager, to whoever, every staff meeting. The more you empower every person in your organization to understand what a risk is and that it needs to be reported, whether they think it's silly or they don't know whether it's valid, doesn't matter. But if they report it up, they are your eyes and ears on the ground. This tool works the same. This is everyone who's looking after your clients that in care, they are your eyes and ears on the ground. Sometimes it will be the nurse. A lot of the time it's going to be the support worker, okay? But everybody has to report it. And the only trigger that is needed is that person doesn't seem their usual self. So it's not clinical. Of course, it can be translated as clinical by the registered nurse or the enrolled nurse or whoever gets called in to come and have a look, but it doesn't have to start clinically. So we do not have to be nurses at frontline to be able to see when somebody's not their usual self. And that's what you want to onboard your team, all your next staff that's onboarded. That's part of their onboarding, that when they see someone who is not behaving as their usual self, not looking their usual self, this is the tool will support care staff to recognize this, respond to this before people become unwell. Can anybody think of some of the deaths that we've had in the NDIS in the last sort of few years that have been a direct result of nobody noticing anything? Can anyone think of a couple of those? There's one in particular, of course.
Yeah, Gina, Susan just said Annie Smith.
Yeah, so Annie Smith, she was, what was she, 2020? Was it 2020, I think, or 2019? She was the reason for the living alone risk assessment, but it didn't end at living alone. It part of that Titanic situation that I call it, where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. The observations weren't made. Yes, the same person every day is not a good idea, but if the same person every day just sometimes is going to happen, sometimes if it really is something that you can't shake the client from wanting, then the way to counteract that and mitigate that is, understanding when someone is not their usual self and using their skills of observation. It's not a good idea to have only one person. I'm not saying that this will make it okay. I'm not saying that at all. Next, this is what the tool looks like. So I've taken the UK tool and amended it. There are two ways to do it. We'll give you, if you do seek to buy the package, you can have the two ways to do it. One of them is the way it was intended, which was to circle the letter. So it can be done as a paper document, and you circle the letter that you notice. So it starts with the observations, and it's stop and watch. That's why it's called stop and watch. So stop and watch is your concept. Stop and watch is your frame of reference. Stop and watch. So eventually, it becomes quite clear when people do things, repetition, 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 they'll remember it, but nobody has to do it without a tool. So what we're looking for is the observations. S is for seems different to usual. That is the first qualifying factor, okay? Just like with the living alone assessment, what's the first qualifying factor for whether you're going to do a living alone assessment? Can you tell me? I mean, you wouldn't pick up a living alone assessment unless this first particular element was present. It's not a trick question, or maybe it is. Maybe it is. What would be the qualifying factor for doing a living alone risk assessment?
The client lives alone?
Yeah, that's it. So if they don't live alone, you don't have to go to that. It's off the table. The first one is why my assessment, my onboarding assessment says, do you live alone? If the answer is yes, it says you must go to the living alone risk assessment. Okay, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts. You go to the living alone risk assessment, albeit when you finished your onboarding assessment in the first place. That's fine. So the qualifying requirement here is you come in, you see they're not quite the same. But what area of that? I mean, so what I've done is I've expanded on this. I've expanded on, it seems different to usual. I've unpacked that in a later document. Talks or communicates less. Overall needs more help. Pain, new or worsening. Participating less in activities. A, ate less, reduced appetite. 48 hours. It gives people a reference point. How do we know? We cannot expect from support workers, whether they're Certificate 3 or not, we can't expect for them to know this. It's not okay to expect that from people who haven't had years of and qualifications and and experience. It's not fair to expect that. So if we can give them a frame of reference, oh, right, reduced appetite for 48 hours. Okay, I can work within that. You're giving me a frame of reference. We're giving frames of reference all the way through here. You know, people are probably getting quite good at the bowel movement business, especially if there's complex bowel care, but not everybody has complex bowel care, do they? So at some point, people's bowels can play up. And if everyone's trained for complex bowel care if you have it, but what if you don't have it? What if you don't even have high intensity personal activities in your service scope, but it could still happen, you know, constipation and or diarrhea are the first signs of something not good. They could pass and nothing become of it, but we owe it. We're being paid to look after someone, care for someone. We are caring and supporting someone. We're not a babysitter that you know can call other people if something goes wrong. We're caring, we're observing, we're looking to see what's going on, and we're writing it down. Drinking less than usual, you know, the weight changes, agitated, A is agitated, more nervous or anxious than usual. T, tired, weak, confused or drowsy. C, change in skin color or the condition. I added or the condition of skin. It was change in skin color, but I also think that a change in the condition of your skin also shows a lot as well. That's certainly how we pick up dehydration. You know, in whether it was babies when I had babies, or whether it was people in aged care when I spent a lot of time working in aged care, simply picking up their skin and just feeling it. Yep. T, tired, weak, confused, or drowsy. C, change the sorry, done that. 8, help needed walking, transferring, or toileting more than usual, or maybe they didn't need any in the beginning. So these are all things that are incredibly, they're used for a reason, because the UK did research and it came back to what are the observations that will most tell us the starting point of somebody who might be becoming unwell. Yeah, deteriorating. Now, I think the most important part after this is, because we just skip over things and we hand things out and we do all this, but what I noticed over the last 30 years is empowering people by giving them the knowledge. You know, we talk about, we'll hand this out and say, everyone go and use this, it's fantastic. And that's pretty good. But I think it's really important to teach them what deteriorating is. Because why, again, if you're talking to an audience which is all registered nurses, they all know what deteriorating is. Enrolled nurses, they'll all know, or diploma nurses, they'll all know what deteriorating is. Maybe someone with a certificate 3 will, if they did it themselves and it wasn't a recognition of prior learning, which I'm finding a lot these days. I'm also finding, if I had my way, I would ban recognition of prior learning for those sorts of things. And also other people are in that recognition of prior learning. You only have to look on sites like Airtasker, Gumtree, Freelancer to find all the people who are doing recognition of prior learning and they're asking somebody to do it for them. So I don't trust those types of qualifications. It doesn't necessarily mean that people know what they're doing. And case scenario, one particular provider I had to do a regulatory support on regulatory response on. One of their staff with a diploma in community services had a person with a bit of a behaviour. They were unsettled. They were becoming, a bit aggressive. So they pulled the EpiPen out of their bag and put it in their leg. Now, you can't tell me that person, seriously, had done that full diploma of community services. I refuse to believe it, because it's just not possible. And there are some times where I'm talking to people in audits and I can see it says they have certificate 3, but my guess is that we have watered down the vocational education and training sector to a point where I don't trust it anymore. With all of our RTOs out there that'll get you through really quickly. First time I ever heard fast track was in 2004, and I thought, fast track? Why are we fast tracking people? We need time to learn and time to consolidate our knowledge. And now we're fast tracking people in 6 weeks. I just don't think it's a good idea. And there's a lot of people who agree with that. So coming down here, you've got two choices. You can use the stop and watch, which is the circle it by hand, or if you prefer, the tick box, which we thought was pretty good. Now, the other version, the UK version, did not have any additional information. I found after going through these forms quite a number of times and making the training, I found that there was a bit of a gap, and that gap was, you know what, I really want to see what it is they saw. I really want to see, seems different. Well, how? What are you seeing that's different to usual? Overall needs more help. In what area? I think just a brief note about that. Otherwise, it's not making as much sense as it could to be. If you're on the receiving end of this and it says yes, which is what the old form said, just yes, tick it, you'd be asking yourself, I'm sure. Well, what? I'm not sure what you saw. So just a bit of an explanation about unpacking that. So that's the tool, but let's go to the most important part as well, which is, you know, equipping people with this information first. As support workers and team leaders, oh, by the way, this PowerPoint presentation goes with the package, because I would love it if you use it to onboard your staff each time, whether you have a learning management system like the one we have where people can put their own training in it, whether you have your own system, whether you're just going to do it in your office or via Zoom, doesn't matter as long as you do it. So so I'll read you the training that we've made. As support workers, team leaders, managers, or business owners, we need to be able to recognise and respond to deterioration or changes in all participants or clients. The important process to grasp when focusing on recognising the early signs for deterioration, and here's what's really important, begins with observing. Secondly, it's documenting. And 3, communication. So what we often see is observing. Oh, sometimes we'll just see observing. We might get a bit of documentation. We've got to improve that. And we don't see the communicate. We're not seeing it go anywhere. So this is part of the framework of the stop and watch tool. It comes with it. I didn't make this bit up. It is 1, observe, 2, document, 3, communicate. Without all 3, it won't work. I always like to use the story. Without the communicate, if you've done observe and you've done document, you might as well throw it up and put it in the bin. It must be observe, document, and communicate, because at a support worker level, where if it's not going anywhere for anybody to action something or come and assess that person, nothing much is going to happen. So the first thing was the trigger. What triggers it? Not their usual self. Secondly, understanding there's 3 parts to this. Observe, document your observations, and communicate them to someone who can actually make a decision. Now I did a little matrix, a little, what's it called? An infographic, I suppose. I wanted to unpack this because so often, like I said, we throw these things at people. Observe, yep, I'll observe. Well, what does that mean? It means with your senses, what you might see, what you might hear, what you might smell, and what you might feel. The word for that in health is palpate, but feel is enough. So what you see, most people are doing what they see. What you hear, smell tells me, when I was a practitioner, a dental practitioner, smell tells me when there's a tooth that's infected. It tells me when someone's gums are infected. It is exactly the same on any other part of your body. Smell and feel, swelling. When we've got swelling or fluid, they're really important senses. And we as clinicians, when I was one, this is what we use. 2, the documentation. It's got to be written somewhere, not just somewhere, but in the right place. And I leave that up to you guys. You know what the right place is for you guys. and communicating it. Who to? Team leaders, registered nurses, the GP, family or guardian. Could be any of these, but someone in a position to do something about it. Because like I said, if you take away the communicate, you may as well throw that in the bin because it's not going to go anywhere, okay? The next part is, so without each of the 3 principles for implementation, the process will not be completed. If you observe deterioration, you must then document this change and communicate it to your supervisor. So getting this through to everyone in your workforce is incredibly useful. None of this is too much for a support worker, with or without certificate 3s. None of this is too much because they use these skills of observation every day. All we're asking them to do is understand a different paradigm of using them here in your work here. That's all. We're just asking for 3 things to be followed here. So let's sort of unpack for you guys, but also so that you can unpack it with your guys. What do we mean by not their usual self? To answer this question, we've got to have the word deterioration. So what does that mean? You know, we could go in and say that to people, but if we don't unpack it, they may never actually understand. So what is deterioration? The Oxford Dictionary defines it as the process of becoming progressively worse. So there's nothing in there about being unwell. Deterioration happens in rocks, in pieces of wood, it's not a health word, it's adapted for health as well. It means becoming worse, okay? Where does deterioration start and finish? So here's the conundrum. And how do we know when we should use the stop and watch tool? When an NDIS participant or aged care client is visibly becoming unwell or just isn't their usual self. So just isn't their usual self, or you can clearly see they're unwell. Either or, just isn't their usual self is a really early warning, okay? Why is it critical to pick up early warning signs? I think most of you will know this, but I'm going to say that 95% of your support work staff won't, and they should. Why do we want to pick it up early? If a person becomes unwell and it goes unnoticed for any length of time, it might increase the person's risk of requiring an avoidable hospital admission. And the reason we don't want people going to hospital who are vulnerable is because of the infections that they pick up. There are more infections in the hospital than there are anywhere else, okay? The lanyard, the thing that has people's ID on them, we tested them years and years ago, and they are the dirtiest thing in the hospital. It's not the toilet, it's the lanyard. And there's a research paper on that. So you want to keep people out of hospital as much as possible. The other thing is it can be you can make them uptight and anxious. Yep. And then things become disruptive and they sort of take a few steps backwards, and you know, it's all going on. We want to pick these things up because we don't want damage to people's organs and their body systems that could lead to a premature death, or, you know, they can be avoided when we pick things up early enough, okay? Because we've got to remember, people are on all sorts of medications. We don't know, you know, for example, anyone who's on lithium, they have to drink a lot of water. We don't want people not drinking water because that can really kill your kidneys, okay? That's not the professional way to say it, but, you know, it can be damaging. But we don't know all these things that are going on. So we teach people enough to be able to catch this broad sweep of, you know, when we notice something's not right. Conditions and situations which can lead to increase in person's current impairment. So, and just diminish their quality of life. So before or just after the mealtime management standard came out, I was talking to someone and they said, no, we don't have anyone with dysphagia. And they didn't have an assessment form that asked anything that would interrogate that. There's certain questions you would ask to figure out if people need any kind of mealtime assistance. Doesn't always come down to dysphagia. It's not all about having a diagnosis of dysphagia. Mealtime assistance can mean many things. So we have to ask those questions in order to find that information. And so when I questioned her further, I said, okay, because I knew she had a lot of people with intellectual disabilities, a lot of people who were quite complex. And I said, what about when people are eating? What do you notice? Like, do you notice anything like, saliva, or, oh yeah, such and such, when they eat, they do drool a lot, and then, oh yeah, and the other person, they cough a lot when they're eating. These are the things we want people to notice. We want to notice these things, and they have to be documented and passed on to someone who can do something about them. That coughing and spluttering, the aspirating. So how do we observe? Well, observe. Number one, observe. We're going to look. People, this is for your staff more than anything else, really. I'm sure a lot of you will know this, but you really want to unpack if people are paler. This wasn't in the tool, but I wanted to put it in because I don't think it's enough just to give someone something and expect them to know. We can't expect anyone to know anything. So does the person appear paler, flushed in the face, sweating more than usual, a rash on their body, unable to move as they would usually? Their eyes are not bright. Maybe they're glazed over. Maybe they're limping. Maybe they're not using an arm or a hand as they usually would. Are they restless, agitated? These are things you can see. Anxious, confused, drowsy, resisting your assistance to move them. That's a really good sign of being in pain. Does the person look like they have swelling in their face, maybe around their mouth or elsewhere or on their face? So keep helping people know, support workers know, because they're your eyes and ears on the ground, what they're going to be looking for. Hearing. Can you hear repetitive noises? Have you heard previously? Is there wheezing, crackle, sound coming from a person's chest? Sneezing, gurgling, something that happens with people who have swallowing difficulties, moaning, crying, or whimpering. Looking out for these signs. Touch. Do they feel hot, especially on their forehead? Can you feel fluid or swelling when you touch the person on the hand or arm? Maybe their ankles or calves. Or when you touch a person, do they recoil or move away in a way that looks like they're in pain? Smell. Can you smell an unpleasant odor on someone? Some bacteria can smell sickly sweet, while others will be strong and putrid like an ammonia. If you notice a strong or foul odor, it could be the start of a developing or worsening wound, even infected teeth or gums. Okay. We find, I have a behaviour support practitioner colleague. One of the first questions she asks or explores with a non-verbal person when she's assisting is, are they in pain? Because most of the behaviours that she's asked to address begin with somebody in pain who can't communicate that. How do we document? If you've identified a change while caring for the participant or client using one of our tools, either circle the letter on the left or use the tick boxes. So you choose which one is going to work for you. The following slides will show you how to use the stop and watch. Now here, I just want to break it down for you, and it's intended for your staff as well. So I'll just move all this Zoom stuff out of my way. We've got two colors here. The green is for the support worker attention, and the team leader is in the grey. So first of all, circle the letter relating to the concern if you're using the traditional method, which is circling. And forgive me. Then remember, give a brief but clear description of the concern. Client didn't finish lunch or dinner for 2 days in a row. Okay, anyone can write that. This isn't clinical observations. These are, very, very clear, easy to understand. Everything that your guys see is important. They will bring it all to you if you give them the tools to do it. Now, for the team leader or supervisor or nurse or enrolled nurse, assess that resident yourself to ensure that once it's come to you, assess that resident yourself to ensure that the tool is completed well and accurately. So that is a responsibility belonging to the person that this is being reported to. Ensure the support worker has documented why. If that doesn't have a reason, it's going to be very hard for you to know what exactly, so they're the main things. This is the responsibility of the support worker to circle or to tick on the other one, and then to give a brief but clear description. And then it is the job of the person that's being reported to make sure it's been completed properly in the first place. Down here, this is the bottom part of your tool. Okay, it's all one page. This is at the bottom part. This is what I call the accountability table. So obviously we need to have a client's name. Here is the support worker responsibility. Client name, support worker name, who's it going to be reported to, and what's the reporting method. Now, I've put here phone or in person. Reporting by email, I just don't think it's, you might have a situation where you've got it all covered and it's never going to go, you know, it's never going to get lost. Remove that if that's the case. But for a lot of people, I see a lot of problems coming when it's not reported either face to face, especially if it's something really important, something that somebody could, you know, could become quite acute quite quickly, I suppose. But this one's up to you. And also, reminding client name and date and time of observation. Here's what I find in all the audits, and Ali, you'll agree with me, I think. We might be lucky enough to get a time, or we might get a date. But you know what? We might not get both. People need to be told. These aren't here for fun. What does it say? One of the most basic things about policy is reading it. What does it say? Date and time. You need the date and time. It's really important. Next, date and time reported, really important, because the amounts of time in between this could be quite relevant. Support worker must write the date and time. That's their responsibility. Team leader, nurse, supervisor, manager, do a little bit of a summary of the response, and then later on the outcome. And then once that's done, the document is completed. Okay. It's meant to explain to people what their accountabilities are. Support worker has an accountability, but so does somebody that's it's being reported to. So for when you're a sole trader and you're the only support worker, not really sure what you do there, you're going to have to really equip yourself up to manage those situations and make decisions whether GPs need to be called or the family need to be called. So that is our PowerPoint, which is the training for your staff as well. Let's have a quick look at, bear with me. Oh, the other thing, okay, let's have a quick look at the tool as itself. Okay, so we've got the two. So we've got the first tool, traditional one, the one that you, oh no, sorry, this is the actual tick box one. Okay, so there's two types, tick box or traditional, which is circle. So it just depends on what people's preferences are. So down the bottom, you can see on both of them, it's just all on one page. And this is what I call the accountability table. So if I'm auditing and I see the top part filled out and not the bottom part, I would just say it's not complete. And that's what any auditor would say. It's incomplete. It's not implemented. So it's important that forms get filled out. So PowerPoint, we've seen the two tools. We've made a stop and watch poster, which repetition, it's what works. Okay, so the more people see it, if they can refer to it, it's going to work in your favor. The other thing we've made is a policy and procedure. Which is, as I said, quite brief. It says exactly what we've talked about, and all the little bits in between. It talks about the references, where this has come from, and gives you a picture of the tool. So it's very brief, but it's a policy. And then we've written a competency assessment. So we've really tried to make this a complete package, not just throwing tools at people, but throwing tools with training, with policy, with a competency assessment. You know, you could, there's nothing that says you have to do this every year or anything, but you could do this every year, or you could just do it on when you onboard people, or when you roll it out retrospectively. But it's just checking out a few key competencies. Understands and can name 3 principles of the stop and watch tool, can list 3 types of deterioration that a participant or client could experience, has an understanding of when the stop and watch tool should be used, has demonstrated knowledge about the requirements to document and communicate deterioration, has an understanding of why it is critical to pick up on the early warning signs of deterioration. I can't remember the actual statistics, but I'll find them and send them to you because I use them in my research. I'll find them when I send you the I include them, but there were astonishing statistics on improved quality of life and avoidable and preventable deaths, etc., and admissions to hospital throughout the aged care and disability sector in the UK. So I will find those for you in my papers, but essentially that's it, guys. But there's one other thing. Actually, we tried this for the first time. Ali, would you show? We've used the most common forms, the most accessible forms. Most people have OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive. Some of you have Google, someone else might have something else, but most people I work with have Microsoft OneDrive, or it's accessible for them. We've built the tool in that, which can be shared. And so if you prefer to do something, avoid the paper and maybe have a QR code where people can just go, with their smartphone or whatever, the QR code, and then complete the tool on that. Ali, would you do that? Show. Ali, I think you on mute.
Yeah. Do you want me to
Yes, could you? Yes.
Sorry,
yes.
walk through it.
Ali built this. Yeah. So this is a way that you could automate it. So you could just do the QR code. They could go straight to this form. Go.
Yeah, so we've put it on here. I'll just preview it so you can see what it would look like if someone was completing it. Just the mandatory fields: client's name, date of observation, support worker's name. And it just says if seems different to usual. If it's a yes, it'll say write your observations, but if it's a no, it doesn't have that pop up, just so that it's a little bit quicker, a way that they can do it on their phone, because Microsoft Forms, when you want to collect responses, it already has a QR code generated for you, or you can embed it, or you can do a shorter
URL. You can have that
URL.
on the wall. You can have it anywhere you want.
Yes, yeah. So that would probably be a good thing to have, so people can just quickly, if they notice something, they can just jot it down straight away and send it to you. We did include at the bottom the questions about reported to, or date and time reported, but you wouldn't have to necessarily include those in this, because they're obviously reporting it to
someone,
to a form. And so with this tool, we would be sharing it as a template with you guys, so you could duplicate it on Microsoft Forms and edit it yourself if you saw fit, or delete those questions. That's how this one would work. It would also obviously work in any form maker that you wanted. If you had a different form maker, you wanted to do it like that, but this is just a template for people who already use Microsoft Office.
Yeah. So there you go. So look, I was excited about it, and that's why I put this together. And reading, the difference it's made in the UK, and there's a couple of places, I think Tasmania have been using it as well. I just think it's a really exciting thing because it's so easy and it's for everyone. It's not like nurses use this, support workers use that. It's like everyone. So that's it. That's all we've got to show and tell. Obviously, we send out the recording. I will send out a link to the package, and if you want to buy it, by all means do. If you don't, that's fine. I hope the information that you received is really helpful. And I guess I would just say, has anyone got any questions or comments?
Yeah, Gina, what's in the package? Is it just a form and...
Nope, we'll go back to that. So what you've got in the package, if you have a look here, you've got that PowerPoint, so you can use it for your staff.
No, sorry, Gina, you stop sharing screen.
Oh, good on me. Good on me. Alrighty, so here's the package. Can everyone see inside my Dropbox now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we've got the PowerPoint. The same one I went through with you is, yep. And we've got both versions of the stop and watch tool, one with that you can circle, one with the tick box. There is the stop and watch poster, which was this one here, which I think from a teaching and learning perspective, I think will be very helpful to have around so that your workers can be constantly looking at it. You know, if they're not seeing it, if they're not getting repetition, then they're not going to learn it as fast or as well. Then you've got your policy and procedure as well, because you don't want to be doing anything that isn't written in a policy and procedure. And then you've got your competency sheet so that you can, you know, really close off that quality loop. So you've got the new action, you've got the policy, you've got the tools, you've got a competency sheet to check people's competency after the training. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Gina, sorry, I came a bit late. I have a question. With this one, I know you were talking about the home and living alone risk assessment.
Yeah.
So this one, what's the expectation? Is it like, do we expect support workers to,
you weren't here in the beginning. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we said was, can anyone tell Zinab what was the trigger? What was the reason that you would use a stop and watch?
Anybody?
Oh my God. Is it going to go in the chat? Nobody going to go for it? What was that trigger? What's the catalyst for even bothering to use a stop and watch?
Anything, any deterioration or any change?
Well, you don't even need to go that far. It just means, remember, we just want to go, they're not their usual self.
Yeah, not their usual self. Yeah,
they're not their usual self. And going back to that, that's why this is so important, so that, you know, if we bring out words to a lot of support workers about any deterioration, I think we've lost them. I think we need to bring it back to, are they their usual self, and what do you use to observe people? And that's why, Zinab, we've unpacked in detail what are observations? What does it mean? What's an observation? So you've got, sensory, right? Okay, so we're looking at our sensory observations. And I think that's probably the most important part on there. But then, you know, talking about in your training and onboarding, making it really clear that these three things go together. If you take out the third one, you may as well not bother. You know, you may as well throw it in the bin, because if you don't communicate it to anybody, it's like writing a letter and just putting in the bin, not in the mailbox accidentally. Yeah. So then, you know, sort of unpacking some of these, what is not their usual self, and what does the word deterioration mean? You know, I think those words, those definitions, understanding that is what's going to build the workforce. This workforce can do it. They've just not been to TAFE or to uni, or, you know, they don't have the benefit of some of the stuff some of us in this room have had. We just have to give it to them, and they can do it. But we've got to unpack it for them and not use big words, make it really simple, and then they'll grasp it and they'll run with it. Yeah. And that's just part of learning, isn't it? We don't just come out with big guns, you know, like they didn't just take me into to put in a, you know, when 30 years ago or 35 years ago, they didn't just take me in and go, we've showed you how to do a filling in a person's mouth, now just do it. They spent a year sort of unpacking a whole lot of terms and doing a whole lot of stuff in the lab. And we have to give people the benefit of giving them the information for them to be able to be our eyes and ears on that ground, you know, bring back the right information. And that's what this is all designed for.
All right, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions, anyone? there's something in the chat there. Any change? Oh yeah, no, that's it. Okay, well look, if there are no more questions, that's fine. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope that you've taken something from that. I was certainly very excited about it, and I can think it make a very big difference. Very big difference. Okay. All right. Well, let's pleasure. Thanks for coming along, and hopefully see you again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.